Let's begin assembling the front part of the jacket. And first, we'll prepare all the pieces that belong to the front panel. The front of the jacket includes several important parts: the central front panel, the pocket bag, the pocket facing, and the facing for the central panel. The pocket bag should be cut from lining fabric. Make sure to transfer all pattern markings onto the fabric. These small guides will help you match each piece accurately when we start stitching. The pocket facing needs to be interfaced from the wrong side. And just like before, transfer the notches from the pattern. Keep them small, no deeper than 5 millimeters. To make pocket construction easier, the pattern uses different colored lines. Whenever you feel unsure, simply glance back at the pattern. Each line will remind you where everything belongs. On the central front panel, you'll also find important markings. Transfer them carefully using small notches. Again, no deeper than half a centimeter since our seam allowance is 1 centimeter. Now, make sure to transfer the roll line of the lapel, the center front line, the button placements, and the buttonholes. I strongly recommend doing this with hand-basted stitches. During pressing, chalk lines tend to fade, and the heat and steam can make them disappear entirely. If the fabric shifts even slightly, those lines may move with it, and then the balance of the jacket changes and you lose the original reference points. Hand basting prevents that. It holds every line exactly where it should be. Next, let's work with the small interfacing strip that supports the lapel area. Cut 2 strips, each 1 centimeter wide. If you have pre-cut tailoring tape, you can use that, but if not, simply cut your own. Just make sure the strip is cut in the direction where the interfacing stretches the least. On the pattern, you'll see notches marking the end of the lapel line. Using these as guides, place the strip on the wrong side of the fabric, starting from the lapel line and moving toward the side seam. Fuse only the top end first. Then gently pull the strip to add slight tension. You'll see tiny waves appear on the fabric underneath. That's exactly what we want. Now fuse the second end and trim any excess. Using only the tip of your iron, slowly fuse the rest of the strip, section by section, pushing the small waves away from you toward the lapel line. Remember, fuse the strip from the side of the central panel, not the lapel. This ensures that when you fold the lapel along its roll line, it naturally falls toward the garment instead of springing back to the center. If you unfold the lapel again, you'll notice that the edges no longer lie flat. Small waves appear along the roll line. This is correct. This is exactly the effect we're aiming for. Do not press them out. And with that, the preparation of the jacket front is complete. We're ready to move on to the pocket itself. Pocket construction. Attaching the pocket to the central front panel. Start by joining the pocket facing and the pocket bag right sides together. Use the colored lines and notches as your guide and pin the pieces together. On the pattern, the pink lines show exactly where these edges should match. They help you avoid mistakes. Pin the pieces carefully and then stitch. When you open the pieces, you may see a small corner of the seam allowance peeking out on the right side. Do not worry, trim this corner. Then trim the whole allowance down to about 5 millimeters. Press it downward. On the right side, you can add a tiny top stitch. This secures the seam allowance downward and keeps it neat. Place the pocket pieces on the central front panel, wrong sides up. This way, the right sides are inside. Align the pocket along the yellow stitching line on the pattern and match the notches first. Pin the pieces together. Now, mark the exact point where the pocket seam should stop from the side seam. Along the princess seam line, mark 1 cm seam allowance. Along the pocket stitching line, also mark 1 cm seam allowance. The intersection of these lines is the point where the seam should end. To make this point visible while sewing, draw a line from the corner of the seam allowance through the intersection. Then transfer this line onto the pocket piece. This helps you see exactly where the seam must stop. Start sewing the pocket. Backstitch at the beginning. As you approach the stopping point, slow down. To control the end point precisely, turn the hand wheel manually instead of using the pedal. Add a backstitch at the end. The seam should stop exactly at the marked point, not a millimeter too short or too long. Alternative method. You can also mark seam allowances on the wrong side of the central panel. The intersection of these lines shows where the pocket seam should end. In this method, sew the pocket from the wrong side of the front panel. To keep the pocket from shifting, baste it with hand stitches first, then stitch along the marked seam from the wrong side. Once the pocket is attached, cut along the line drawn earlier from the corner of the seam allowance to the intersection point. Stop about 1 millimeter before the seam. Work slowly and carefully to avoid cutting too deep. Turn the pocket to the wrong side of the central panel. Take a moment to examine it carefully if you are a beginner. From the wrong side, baste the pocket opening with diagonal hand stitches. Place the central panel right side up and turn the pocket toward the center front. Lift the small corner of the pocket seam allowance, aligning it with the princess seam. Trim the corner so it does not interfere with future sewing. Fold the lower part of the central panel away from the pocket toward the center front, freeing the princess seam all the way down. Turn the pocket seam allowance corner upward and align it with the princess line. Pin it in place. I recommend securing this corner temporarily with hand stitches. This will make it easier to attach the side front panel along the princess seam. By fixing the corner in this position, the princess seam is now fully extended along the central front panel. Move the remaining fabric of the central panel from the pocket toward the center front and upward, freeing the princess seam. If you are a beginner, I suggest repeating the same process on the left front panel to better understand the steps and reinforce your learning. If you are experienced, you can skip ahead to the next section. Preparing the side panel, joining side panels to the central panel. Start by transferring the dart lines, the hemline, and the connection marks onto the side front panels. Notice the light blue line on the side panel. This indicates the area for slight easing at the waist, so the piece fits the body smoothly. Fold the side panel right sides together, aligning the dart lines, and pin in place. Once the darts are aligned, pin horizontally to make sewing easier. Repeat the same process on the other side panel and stitch the darts. Press the darts toward the center front to make it easier to correct the side where we see the bust line. Now we shape the side edge at the waist using easing. Easing is a gentle stretch of a small fabric section to create a smooth side curve. From the waistline, stretch upward and downward slightly. Rotate the panel as needed for comfort, but always work from yourself with the side edge closer to you. The side panels are now ready to be joined with the central panels. On the central panel, fold the lower part away from the pocket to free the princess seam. Align the panels right sides together using the connection marks and pin. Place the central panel on top. At the bust area, the side panel has a pronounced curve, while the central panel is slightly curved. I recommend basting these sections by hand temporarily, distributing the fabric evenly. Do not pull or stretch. Let the fabric and your fingers settle naturally. Looking from the central panel, you can see where the seam should pass near the pocket. Sew from the central panel side to maintain visibility and control. Approach the pocket area slowly, smoothing any folds and keeping the seam straight. Start about 5 centimeters below and finish 5 centimeters above the pocket area. Once complete, remove the temporary hand basting stitches. Examine the sewn panels carefully, remove temporary stitches at the bust area, press the seam open. I recommend using a sleeve board or a small pressing tool to make it easier. Press only the seam, not the entire panel, to shape it neatly. At the bust, you may use a small tool or a flat surface to press the seam comfortably. Turn the panels right side up and check that everything lies correctly. If your fabric shows iron marks, always use a pressing cloth to protect the surface. Now for the pocket, lay the front panel flat and smooth the fabric. The side line of the pocket extends beyond the side panel by about 1.5 centimeters. First, align the inner pocket with the central panel at the side edges. Baste temporarily by hand. If the lining has stretched slightly, do not worry. Simply trim the excess to align the bottom edge. Next, align the side edge of the pocket with the side panel and pin. You will now see the pocket forming its curved shape. For stability, I recommend hand basting the side edges. Turn the panels to the wrong side. Align the pocket bottom edge with the side panel bottom, then with the central panel bottom. Start from the side edge and move toward the center. Notice that the lower edge lifts slightly. This is correct. When we fold the hem allowance upward, the fabric will naturally form the pocket's convex shape on the right side. Do not press flat, the shape will form on its own. Secure the lower edge temporarily with hand stitches. If you are a beginner, repeat the same process on the other front panel to reinforce your understanding. If you are more experienced, you may skip ahead to the next stage. preparing the front facings, basting the front edge. On the wrong side, fuse interfacing to the facings. Transfer all pattern markings onto the fabric. Also, mark the center line and the lapel roll line with hand-basted stitches. Mark the points where the seam will end when attaching the facing to the front. Place the facing on the front panel, right sides together. Align the pieces carefully using the marks. The first important mark is the end of the lapel line. Next, align the hemline and pin from the hem up to the end of the lapel line. Then align the marks where the seam should stop. Now flip the pieces. You will see that the facing extends about 0.7 centimeters beyond the central front panel at the lapel edge. This is correct and crucial for forming a smooth, elegant lapel tip. Pin the aligned end of lapel marks, but do not pin the rest yet. Next, align the center tips. Notice that the facing fabric has extra width distributed evenly. Place the facing on top. Baste by hand to create a small gather along this edge. This slight gathering shapes the lapel tip so that when turned right side out, the tip points inward and downward, not upward. We do not want the tip to stick up. This ensures a neat, professional finish. I recommend hand basting this area, especially for beginners. Now you can see that the wave appears only in the seam allowance of the facing. The lapel itself remains smooth along the seam line. This is correct. Sew from the hem to the end mark at the top. Do not sew beyond this point. Remove the hand basting stitches. Trim the seam allowance to 0.5 centimeters and trim the corner leaving about 0.1 centimeters so it can turn neatly. Trim the seam allowance from hem to top, also leaving 0.5 centimeters. At the top, make a small cut in the seam allowance slightly angled toward the front line. This protects the seam allowance for later collar attachment. A straight cut may risk stretching or tearing the seam allowance at the end. After the cut, trim the remaining seam allowance on the facing. Turn the lapel tip to the right side. From the right side, you can see the effect of the previous gathering in the lapel tip. When folded along the lapel roll line, the tip points downward and inward. From the end of the lapel line to the hem, baste the edge of the facing with diagonal stitches. We baste from the facing side to create underlap on the inside. This way, when viewed from the outside, the seam is invisible. From the hem of the lapel line up to the top mark where the seam ends, we will baste from the central front panel side. Why from this side? Because the lapel folds along the roll line toward the facing, and the right side of the lapel is part of the facing. Let's sum it up. The front part of the jacket is now completed. I divided the video into sections. In the first section, we assembled the front pieces of the jacket, sewed the pocket, and prepared the front parts for connecting them to the back of the jacket. I invite you to continue sewing the jacket in the upcoming parts.